I never thought I would be the kind of person to post about work drama. But I need to get this off my chest. I keep replaying everything, wondering if I missed something, some sign, some clue that this would happen. For 3 years, I put everything into this job. Late nights, weekends, extra projects. Whatever it took to prove I was ready for the next step. My boss knew it. Everyone knew it. So when the promotion finally opened up, I thought it was mine. But they gave it to someone else. Someone with half my experience. And when I went to HR, they told me I should be happy for her. I have always been the kind of person who believes hard work speaks for itself. If you put in the effort, stay dedicated, and prove your worth, success will come. That is what I told myself when I joined my company 3 years ago. I was not just another employee, I was invested. I took on extra projects without being asked. I stayed late to help coworkers when they were struggling. I even spent my own time learning new skills to make myself a more valuable asset to the team. And it was not like I was the only one who saw it. My coworkers knew I was dedicated. My boss regularly praised my work in meetings. I was the one people turned to when they had questions. I was the person who trained new hires. So when a management position finally opened up in my department, I thought, this is it. This was the promotion I had been working toward. I did everything right. I made my interests clear. I prepared for the interview weeks in advance. I gathered all the data I could to prove that I was the best person for the job. Performance metrics, successful projects I had led, glowing feedback from clients. I walked into that interview confident, knowing I had earned this. And then 2 weeks later, they announced the promotion in a department meeting. It was not me. It was Emily. Emily, who had been with the company for only a year and a half. Emily, who had no leadership experience and barely understood half of the processes I had spent years perfecting. Emily, who had once come to me for help on a project because she did not understand how to complete it. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. I do not even remember the rest of that meeting. My mind was spinning too fast, my heart pounding in my ears. When it was over, people started coming up to me, some awkwardly avoiding eye contact, others giving me those pitying looks that made me want to scream. Even Emily looked uncomfortable when she walked past my desk. She did not say anything. She just offered this small, nervous smile like she knew she had taken something that was never meant to be hers. I was not going to make a scene. I am not that kind of person, but I had to know why. So I emailed my boss and asked if we could talk. He agreed, though his response felt oddly rushed, like he had been expecting this conversation. The next day, I sat across from him in his office, hands clasped tightly in my lap to keep from shaking. I took a breath and asked as calmly as I could, "Can you help me understand why I was not chosen for the promotion?" He sighed, leaning back in his chair like this was a conversation he really did not want to have. "It was a tough decision," he said. "You are an incredible asset to the team, and there is no doubt that you are capable." I waited for the but we felt Emily would bring a fresh perspective to the role. A fresh perspective. That was it. No mention of my experience. No acknowledgement of the extra time I had put in. No recognition of the fact that I had been working toward this for years. I kept my voice steady. "Is there something I could have done differently? Something I need to improve?" He hesitated. "No, you are doing great work. This was just about the direction we want to take the department." The direction. Right. I walked out of that office feeling numb. If there was nothing I could have done differently, if I had not failed in any way, then what was the point of all my effort? But the worst part, the part that still makes my stomach twist when I think about it, HR's response. Because after that meeting, I decided to take it a step further. Not to complain, but to get some clarity. Maybe there was a company policy I was unaware of. Maybe I needed a certain certification. Something. Anything that would explain why this decision had been made. The HR rep, let's call her Lisa, listened to me with that fake, overly sympathetic expression that people in HR always have when they are about to say something condescending. I explained my situation, laying it out as professionally as I could. I did not want to sound bitter. I just wanted answers. And do you know what she said? She smiled and said, "I understand how you feel, but you should be happy for Emily. This is a great opportunity for her." I just stared at her, trying to process those words. Happy. Happy for her? I worked for this. I earned this. And they wanted me to be happy for the person who just skipped the line ahead of me? I forced a nod, thanked her for her time, and walked out of that office with my hands clenched so tightly that my nails left marks on my palms. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything over and over again. I had done everything right. I had proven myself. And somehow, none of it had mattered. And the worst part, I still had to show up the next morning, sit at my desk, and act like everything was fine. The morning after that meeting was one of the hardest mornings of my life. I woke up with a pit in my stomach, the kind that made me want to call in sick and avoid the office altogether. But I could not. That would be admitting defeat. So I got up, got dressed, and walked into that office like nothing was wrong. Like my entire world had not just been flipped upside down. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it. The shift. People were acting different around me. Some avoided eye contact entirely, like they were afraid talking to me would get them involved in some kind of office drama. Others gave me that weird forced smile, like they wanted to say something but did not know how. A few of my closer coworkers did stop by my desk to say they were surprised by the decision, that they had been rooting for me, but their voices were hushed, like they were afraid of being overheard. The worst part, Emily, I could feel her watching me, not in a gloating way. If anything, she looked guilty. She kept her distance at first, but by lunchtime, she finally worked up the nerve to approach me. "Hey," she said, shifting awkwardly from foot to foot. I wanted to say that I hope this is not weird between us. I really respect you." I should have taken a deep breath. I should have forced a smile and said something professional, but all I could do was stare at her and wonder why. Why had they picked her over me? "Congratulations," I said finally. It was the most neutral thing I could come up with. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, but she still looked uncomfortable, like she knew she had skipped ahead of someone more qualified. Maybe she had not even asked for the promotion. Maybe she was just as blindsided as I was. But none of that changed the reality. I was still the one who had been overlooked. The rest of the week was a blur of forcing myself to act normal, keeping my head down, and trying not to let the frustration eat me alive. I avoided unnecessary conversations and focused on my work. If my boss thought I would slack off just because I had been passed over, he was wrong. But as the days passed, something else became clear. Emily was struggling. The role she had been given was too much for her. She had no idea what she was doing. She was asking basic questions, making mistakes that should have been easy to avoid, and constantly looking overwhelmed. More than once, she came to me for guidance, which only made everything worse, because that was when I realized I was still doing the job I had been denied. One afternoon, she came to my desk with a nervous expression, holding a folder. "Hey, I am so sorry to bother you, but I am supposed to submit this report by the end of the day, and I am not sure if I formatted it correctly. Would you mind taking a quick look?" I should have said no. I wanted to say no, but my instincts kicked in, and before I knew it, I was scanning the document and fixing her mistakes. "You need to adjust these figures," I said, handing it back. "And this section is incomplete." She sighed, rubbing her forehead. "God, thank you. I really appreciate this." I did not respond. I could not, because in that moment it hit me. If I was good enough to train the person who got the job, why was I not good enough to have the job? The resentment kept building. Every time she needed my help, every time she struggled in meetings, every time I overheard her getting praised for things I had been doing for years. And then one day, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. I was at the copier, waiting for my documents to print, when I heard my boss talking to another manager in the break room. They did not see me standing just outside. "Yeah, Emily was the safer choice," my boss said, lowering his voice slightly. "We did not want to take any risks with the promotion." The other manager hummed in agreement. "I get it. Sometimes, it is better to go with someone who will not rock the boat." Rock the boat. Rock the boat. That was when it clicked. It had nothing to do with my skills. It had nothing to do with Emily bringing a fresh perspective. They had chosen her because she was easy, because she was not the kind of person who would push back, challenge bad decisions, or question leadership. And me? I had been too outspoken, too confident, too much. I walked back to my desk in a daze, my hands shaking. This was not just about a promotion. This was about office politics. About making sure the person in charge was someone who would not make waves. I had wasted 3 years thinking hard work mattered, thinking loyalty mattered. I had been so wrong. That conversation haunted me for days. The words kept echoing in my head. Emily was the safer choice. We did not want to take any risks. I could not stop thinking about it. No matter how much I tried to focus on my work, it was always there, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. I had been so stupid, so naive. I had thought that if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself, I would get what I had earned. But none of it had mattered. My experience, my dedication, my loyalty, it had all been meaningless because I was not the kind of person they wanted in charge. I felt trapped. There was no way to win. If I stayed quiet and did my job, I would keep being overlooked. If I spoke up, I would be seen as a problem. And all the while, I was still doing the work of a manager without the title, while Emily kept struggling to keep up. Something in me snapped. I was done being silent. The breaking point came when Emily yet again asked for my help on a project that she was supposed to be leading. She stood next to my desk, nervously holding a stack of papers. "I know you are busy," she said, shifting her weight from foot to foot. "But I am really struggling with this report, and I remember you did one like it last quarter. Would you mind just taking a quick look?" I stared at her, something cold settling in my chest. "Emily," I said slowly, "do you think our boss would have given me this same grace if I had gotten the promotion and needed this much help?" Her face turned pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She knew the answer. For the first time, she did not argue or make excuses. She just gave a small, embarrassed nod and walked away. That moment made something clear. I was not going to keep holding this place together while they rewarded someone else for my work. So I started documenting everything. Every email where Emily asked for help. Every Slack message where she needed me to explain basic tasks. Every time I had to step in to prevent a mistake that would have made the company look bad. And then, when I had gathered enough, I scheduled a meeting with my boss. I walked into his office and sat down, keeping my expression neutral. He looked surprised to see me. Maybe he had assumed I had just accepted my fate. "I wanted to follow up on our previous conversation," I said. "About the promotion." He shifted in his chair. "We already discussed." I cut him off by sliding a folder onto his desk. "These are all the times I have had to step in and do Emily's work for her." My voice was calm, controlled. "I am still doing the job you said I was not qualified for." His face darkened as he flipped through the documents. "I do not see what you are trying to accomplish here." I leaned forward. "I want to know why I am good enough to train the person you promoted, but not good enough to have the job myself." Silence. He had no answer. Finally he sighed. "Look, I understand you are frustrated, but what is done. I nodded slowly, as if considering his words. Then I stood up. "All right," I said. "Then I guess I have my answer." I walked out of his office, my heart pounding, but I already knew what I had to do. I was leaving, and I was going to make sure they regretted ever taking me for granted. After that meeting, I made a decision. I was done giving this company my time, my effort, and my loyalty. They had made it clear that none of it mattered. That night, I updated my resume and started applying for new jobs. I reached out to former colleagues, industry contacts, anyone who might have a lead on a better opportunity. It was almost freeing. For the first time in years, I was not worried about being the perfect employee. I was not going to bend over backward for people who saw me as nothing more than a tool. But before I could make my exit, something happened that made everything even worse. A week after my conversation with my boss, HR called me in for a check-in. I knew immediately what it was about. Word had gotten out that I was not quietly accepting my fate. I sat across from the HR rep, a woman named Linda, who always had that fake, overly pleasant customer service tone. "I understand you have some concerns about the recent promotion decision," she said, folding her hands neatly on the desk. I kept my expression neutral. "Concerns? No, I think everything is very clear." She smiled like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "We want to make sure you feel supported in your role. You have always been a valuable member of the team." I let out a short laugh. Valuable? Is that why I was passed over for someone with half my experience? Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she composed herself. "We understand that change can be difficult, but you should be happy for Emily. She is adjusting to the role, and she needs support." I stared at her, barely believing what I was hearing. "So let me get this straight," I said, leaning forward. "You want me to be happy for the person who took the promotion I earned? And you want me to help her succeed in a role that should have been mine?" Linda's smile tightened. "We are all part of the same team." I let out a slow breath and shook my head. "No, you are all part of a team. I am just the person you expect to do the work while someone else gets the credit." Her face hardened slightly. "That is not fair." I tilted my head. "Neither is what happened to me." The meeting ended soon after, with her giving me the usual corporate nonsense about growth opportunities and future considerations. But I knew the truth. They were just trying to pacify me long enough for me to either give up or burn myself out. I was not going to give them the satisfaction. I continued applying for jobs in secret, but I also started pulling back at work. I stopped going above and beyond. I stopped answering Emily's endless questions. When she struggled in meetings, I let her struggle. When she made mistakes, I let them happen. I was done being their safety net. And then 2 weeks later, I got the call I had been waiting for. A company I had interviewed with, one of our biggest competitors, offered me a position, a better position, with a higher salary and a real path for growth. The moment I received the offer letter, I printed it out, walked straight to my boss's office, and placed it on his desk. He looked up in surprise. "What is this?" I smiled. "My resignation." He blinked. "You are leaving?" "Yes." His eyes flicked to the offer letter, and I saw his face tighten when he saw where I was going. "We could have found a way to make things work," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "You had that chance. You chose to give my promotion to someone else." He looked away, but I was not done yet. "I trained half this team. I fixed problems before you even knew they existed. I held this place together while you handed my job to someone who could barely keep up." I shook my head. "You did not want me in a leadership role? Fine. Now you can see how well things run without me." I turned and walked out, leaving him speechless. And let me tell you, that was the best feeling in the world. Walking out of that office for the last time felt surreal. For so long, I had tied my worth to that company, to the work I did, to the recognition I thought I would eventually receive. But as I stepped outside, breathing in the fresh air, I realized something. I was finally free. For the first time in years, I was not carrying the weight of keeping everything running while being undervalued. I was not worried about fixing someone else's mistakes. I was not waiting for validation that was never going to come. The days leading up to my last one at the company were interesting, to say the least. The moment word got out about my departure, the panic started. My boss tried to act like it was no big deal, but I could see the cracks forming. People started realizing just how much I had been doing behind the scenes. Emily, of course, was the most affected. The day after I announced my resignation, she pulled me aside near the break room. "I heard you are leaving," she said, her voice tight. I nodded. "Yes." She hesitated, then blurted out, "Why?" I stared at her, wondering if she was really that clueless. Then I just gave a small smile. "Because I found a place that actually values me." Her face fell, and for the first time, I saw guilt in her expression. Maybe she had convinced herself that I was fine with everything. Maybe she had assumed I would always be there to help her. But now she had to stand on her own, and she was not ready for that. In my final week, the company scrambled to figure out how to fill the gap I was leaving. My boss tried to get me to document everything I did, but I kept it vague. I was not going to make it easy for them to replace me. Then, just 2 days before my last day, he called me in for a final meeting. "Listen," he started. "I know things did not go the way you wanted, but we do appreciate everything you have done here." I said nothing. I just waited, because I knew there was more. Sure enough, he sighed and continued. "If you would be willing to stay, we could revisit your position in a few months." I almost laughed. "You mean I should stay and keep doing the work of a manager without the title or the pay?" while you take your time deciding if I am worthy of a role you already passed me over for? His expression tightened. I am saying we could reevaluate. I leaned back. No, thank you. His jaw clenched, but he nodded. Well, if you ever change your mind. I cut him off with a small smile. I will not. And that was that. On my last day, I walked out of that office without looking back. A month later, I was thriving in my new job. My new boss actually valued my skills. My workload was manageable. I was paid what I was worth. And best of all, I did not have to constantly prove myself just to be taken seriously. In the old company, well, I started hearing things through the grapevine. Emily struggled a lot. Without me there to guide her, her mistakes piled up. Clients started complaining. Deadlines were missed. She was in way over her head. And my former boss had to step in constantly just to keep things afloat. 2 months after I left, Emily was quietly demoted. 3 months after I left, she resigned. And my former boss? He had to answer for why he had put someone so unqualified in a leadership role, while letting someone competent walk out the door. I do not know what happened to him after that. I do not really care. Because the truth is, the best revenge was simply leaving, letting them deal with the mess they created, watching from a distance as they realized they had made a mistake, too late to fix it. And I was finally somewhere I was valued, and I had never been happier.